Hello everyone, Kenty Tiger here with Bengali Engineering in Play. We are back in Space Engineers. We're continuing on with the basic survival tutorial even though we've gone far, far beyond basic. So to recap on where we're at, we have, let me see, in our basic survival area we had a utility satellite that we completely welded up, which meant we had to gather some resources. We refined those resources, then assembled into the components we needed and built up the satellite completely. Once we had the satellite completely built, then we focused on the next endeavor, which was really to develop another miner, which is really to say a small ship miner, which we kind of pulled in from a previous tutorial, which was the mining drone. Not a huge drone by any means. 4 drills on the front, 4 small ship drills, and we used that. Got more resources, let them refine down, and then put enough resources together to build a large scale or a larger scale miner, which is sitting over here. So let me turn those on so you can see that medium miner over there. And once we had the medium miner, then we gathered even more materials, refined them down, and then set out to build ourselves a base. And this is just a generic base. Obviously not a whole lot of creativity involved here, just a big blocky thing that we can use to carry on in our mission to survive. Even though we're kind of way beyond the basic survival stage, as I said. So the next thing we did was dismantle our utility satellite, mostly because with the base here we don't need it anymore. We're pretty much well beyond the need of the utility satellite for basic survival, and this base is much more capable. There's 5 refineries that can get going at any time. There are 5 cooperative assemblers running here. So pretty much I think, and this is really a matter of opinion on how extravagant your bases need to be or have to be, but my concept here was we get a base that meets all of the requirements and really illustrate our way through. And so hopefully this has been an educational experience, a learning experience, and an enjoyable experience so far. So what is the only thing really left to do? We've got a larger scale miner, so we have the ability to pull in all those resources. So really the only thing that we do not yet have is our ability to shall I say, protect ourselves remotely. So what I thought I would do is spend a little bit of time building a fighter. Now, I guess it's safe to say that everybody has a different perspective of what a fighter is and what a fighter should be. So, for the sake of discussion, we'll just simply put some basic criteria onto the proverbial table here. So I want guns, which is to say Gatling guns, and I want 2 missile launchers, reloadable missile launchers. So I'm going to design a fighter around that premise. So those basic criteria. I want reloadable missile launchers and I want Gatling guns. So how do we do that? Well, fighter cockpit looks a lot more sleek, a lot nicer than that regular cockpit. So I think we'll go ahead and use that. I also want to have, true with my design here of the landing platforms, to have a connector on the bottom. So that's actually another criteria. Now whether we have landing gear or not is really kind of up to the design scheme and how we're going to do it. I tend to like to have the landing gear on the bottom just because I think it looks a lot nicer It looks much more like a fighter aircraft, something that you can bring in and land. So those are just some basic ideas that I would like to use in terms of fighter. So I think what I will do, let me go ahead and put everything back on the screen here. I think a lot of this we can move off. Medical, airtight, conveyor sorter, and sort container. So I'm going to leave the timer block there. You know what? No, I don't. I need, if anything, we'll need a programmable block. So let's go ahead and use that. We'll go ahead and drag the landing gear out here. We're going to need a connector, ultimately, which is here. We're going to need, in the small conveyor tubes, very likely, maybe the conveyor frame, and we'll drag a medium, if we can find it, medium cargo container here, because I think that's going to be basically all that we need. In this case, the conveyor junction is different on the small ships versus the larger ship grids. Large ship grids, or the station grids, which is also large. So we're going to bring that conveyor junction in here, which will give us a little bit of flexibility, and I think we'll have to use that when it comes to our missile launchers. So weapons and tools, our rocket launcher, in this case our reloadable rocket launcher, and then our Gatling gun. So those are our basic things that we're going to need to make everything happen. Two, we'll go ahead and get rid of a lot of things here. I did have the connector there. Glass, not necessary. Blocks, we'll probably end up doing blocks later on, but I guess we'll go ahead and put a basic block here. Here's my fighter cockpit, so we'll want to go ahead and put that out there. And then we have to decide what type of thrusters we're going to use. Are we going to use ion thrusters? Are we going to use hydrogen thrusters? Atmospheric thrusters? Hydrogen, of course, is suitable for anywhere. But if we're building this fighter for space, then we could very easily use ion thrusters. If we're intending this to work within an atmosphere, then obviously atmospheric thrusters. The problems, of course, with hydrogen thrusters is then we need a ready supply of hydrogen, possibly even a tank, and that tank is pretty big. So it's kind of one of those things of how do we want to do this as far as propulsion goes. So let me get the basic stuff laid out here. We'll grab one more thing, which happens to be the gas generator. Which is this here. And figure out where that is actually going to be. Let me get my Tiger Orange selected here. I'm going to make sure Space Master is turned off, which it is. Alright, so let's start off with, ironically enough, the cockpit. The reason I'm going to bump into the ground here, oh, and it didn't work how I wanted it to. I was kind of hoping that it would shift and rotate around to the point where, alright, I suppose not going to do that. So steel plate, of course. So one of the things I somewhat eliminated, and I think, in fact, maybe I should go ahead and do that while I'm really thinking about it. We'll turn on Space Master for a moment here. We will do a Control B, which will actually save this base, vanilla base. Imagine that. And turn off Space Master. And then what we're going to do is actually utilize some down here. So let me I thought dummy blocks. I thought dummy 08 was where we had our can't find them anywhere. Okay, let's go to our grinding mode here. I guess let's start out with these in the center. Steel plate, of course. And the flashy being back, of course. Steel plate. So we have some of those. Let us see. Components, steel plates, how about? Alright. We'll start out with 8 and go from there. This is just to make my life a little easier. So obviously we're taking this out of the vanilla mode, but we've already saved as vanilla. Not the drill, we want this. And we'll go ahead and put this one up. Large steel tubes, of course. Had to be something. This flashing that I cannot get rid of is absurdly annoying. Again, I wish Keen would actually play their games so they would realize, hey, this is fucked up, maybe we should fix this. In this case, we have all these build and repair systems. I want to configure them all simultaneously, even though they are not built. So this is the BRS array. We're going to go ahead and save that. Turn it off on the toolbar and turn it off on the terminal. There is an inventory capability, so we'll leave that there. So BRS array, and then we'll go ahead and configure. That's back. Help others. We are going to configure in fly mode, which means, so there's walk mode, which is everything attached to this grid. Fly mode means we can leave this grid and go to other grids or neighboring or things right around. the three options for working mode, we either weld before grind, grind before weld, or grind if weld gets stuck. So we're going to do that. Use ignore color. This is 113 and 100, 100. This one in this case, because I know where this usually lands, is 313.2 and 100, 100. Grid far versus near, so we want to select on far. We're going to grind enemy blocks and grind unknown blocks. This can be a little bit of a challenge because blocks that inherently are not ownable, like armor blocks and everything, even if you're trying to build them, will grind them down for you. So this can be a little bit of a problem. You can set your priorities here. Build and repair priority, dismantling priority, all that sort of thing. And I like to push components immediately out to the containers. In this case, I'm going to set the sound volume to 15 because if it's up at 50%, it gets a little bit obnoxious. Or it did. It's not as nearly as bad anymore. Alright, so having worked with this, we're going to go ahead and turn these guys on, which is really, let's go ahead and turn the entire array of them on, and then eventually they will finish building themselves, I hope. Yeah, there we go. So, and as they progress, they will build each other, and then be readily available to build other things. The advantage there is that I don't have to stop, reload my own inventory, and do everything that I do. All I have to focus on is building. So we're going to go ahead and do that. See if this makes any difference. There we go. So we're going to bring this up in the air just a little bit so we can work underneath as we build. I think that's about it. Oh, am I still in Space Master? No. Okay. I was afraid I'd totally goinked it there. Alright. The challenges here are how to set up everything for inventory, that sort of thing. So, where do we put... So, we have... ports here on the front. We have one here on the underside, both small, and then we have this big one on the back. So what can we do with some of this stuff? And that really depends on where everything is going to go as far as while we're building here. So what do I need to do? Well, I definitely need an oxygen supply. So if I have no other purpose for oxygen here, then that wouldn't be a bad idea. But I also want to put things like missile turrets, or rather the missiles out here. So what I think I'm going to do, rather than put that directly onto the back here, is go ahead and use this guy. Now, the thing to remember about the junction is you have three ports, three small ports on opposing sides. So this side and, this side. And then you have four large ports. So here's my idea here is I've got three ports, top and bottom, that are the small ports. And then I've got the four. So I'm going to paste this in. My idea is that I will put my missile launchers on the sides, and then we'll go ahead and put the gaseous generator here on the back. Now, this may get me into trouble in my design, but we'll see how it goes. The downside with the missiles close in is that we have very typically we have that problem of the missiles actually striking the vessel that's firing them. So what we want to go ahead and do, we'll go ahead and use this conveyor frame. We'll put a frame on this side, put a frame on this side, and then we'll put the missile launchers. And the only thing I have to do is figure out which way the missile launchers actually go. I think that's forward. I think. So we'll find out here. Reload. Yep, it looks like that's my reloadable side. All right. The next thing that we kind of have to figure out is how do we want to put in guns and how many. So what I typically end up doing is putting a bunch of guns on the front here. There's a bunch of different ways to do this, and the one thing to remember about the Gatling gun, let me go ahead and bring up the Gatling gun so you can see it. In fact, let me go ahead and there you can see it even better. The Gatling gun has a small port on both sides, but nowhere else. So keep this in mind when you're building, because you may end up with some challenges that you did not expect. So what do I want to do here? Normally, and I only brought the medium container, which may or may not might get me in trouble here. So the couple things I'm missing here, which I did not consider, which we'll fix, I think, is I need my medium container, but I also wanted to put a I also wanted to put a connector facing down. So I think I can do that with another coupler, another junction, conveyor junction. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and so we have already put our missiles on here. So let's go ahead and we need a small container. And the reason we need a small container, this is probably aptly described as a Kentism, but I want to have small containers, and we can do this a couple different ways. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put 2 small containers here, and the reason for these small containers is ammo. So I want to have the ability to have ammo here, and at the same time we're going to create a mechanism by which we can add on a few guns. So if we look here, the guns are aligned. As I rotate, you see there's now a port on the top and the bottom, but ultimately I want it there. So we'll put a gun there and a gun here, and I just, because I like having more guns than I know what to do with, I'm going to put one that's set back 1. And put it there. Now, we could have, and this is where we get a little bit challenging, we put another gun here in the front, but the trick here is that we need a way to attach it. So what we'll have to do is put some go to number 6 here and figure out, are we going to use this, which we can, and there, which would then connect all of those weapons in. Now let's pretty this up a little bit. I always like to, so let's, we've got our block. The question now here is, do I use light armor or heavy armor? Now, considering that most of this ship is bulletproof glass and other items that are rather susceptible to some sort of fire, then protecting things with heavy armor may or may not be to your advantage. It really all just depends on how you want to build something. Obviously, it's going to make the ship a lot heavier if you build with heavy, but you know what? I think just for sake of doing so, we'll go ahead and build with heavy. I'm going to need the oxygen generator again, but I want to move it. So we're going to actually put that over here. We've already got our cockpit built, so that's not a big deal. So back to the blocks. Delete that. So heavy armor, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag all 4 of these out here. So here's the heavy armor, and then the heavy armor inverted. And we may or may not use any of those. I don't really have. I'm doing this, I can't say totally random because I'm not sure I can actually do totally random, but we may or may not use those. So I'm just kind of winging it as I go. In this case, I want, oh, that's because that's selected. Let's select that one. Half slope, nope, but I do want the armor slope. So in this case, slope, and then I'm gonna kind of have these slightly recessed. You know, the bottom one there obviously is out, but we're gonna recess the other one, and this may or may not look interesting. And I think we'll go ahead and do approximately the same thing on the bottom. So we need our swivel there, here, and put our corner piece here. In this case, I think we'll do a slope there. This back to the slope, and so add some protection onto this. All right. I'm going to anticipate something here, and I think it will all work out. So I think it's in slot number 3 and 8 is my landing gear. I'm gonna have, darn it. I'm gonna have to put my, this is my forward landing gear obviously, so I'm gonna put that there. And the reason I put it there is it kind of provides a little bit of protection to these guys, but it also lets me kind of visualize where everything is ultimately going to be. Alright, so interesting looking front end there. And ultimately we'll colorize a little bit as we go along. If I have my druthers, then we're actually going to put, and I don't know if this will work out as intended, but we'll go ahead and put, I'm going to put 2 Gatling cannons here, and then 2 on the other side. Now that's a little bit dangerous because that's right next to the missile. But the trick here is that when you're firing your missiles, line up, do not move, and then fire. So that's kind of one of those things. All right. So here's what we want to do relative to these guys. So we're going to 6. We're going to put a conveyor here, conveyor junction. We're going to put an elbow there, and then a straight through here, which now plumbs in these guys. In fact, if I were doing anything intelligently at all, which is left to be seen, let's do this. We'll go back to here, and we will do a small cargo container here and here. Why did we do that? Ammo. There, that's ammo. And we can go ahead and just for fun do ammo, and we can't do any more because the landing gear is there. All right. Now, just to pretty things up slightly more, we're going to go ahead and put in a inverted corner. Now, in keeping with the tradition of the tiger striping, then we'll go ahead and put these here and change some of these coloration patterns here. And then we're going to do the one more, go the other way, one more, and put this here, and then we're actually going to recolor this guy to be black. Perhaps that one, and then those two, just for fun. That one. All right. So at this point, it's really just a matter of figuring out what are we going to do in terms of more weapons. So right now, if we look, we have 4 guns front. We have 2 guns port, 2 guns starboard, which means we have right now 8 guns, 8 Gatling guns, which is quite a bit. But after all, Gatling guns are a lot of fun, so maybe having more will be good. But let's continue on with our original design theory, which means. Okay, sorry, a little disaster there. Um, so what we want to do here is we'll get back to the junction 3. In this case, I really want to. So this is the 4 large connections that we're working with. Sorry about that. That's in the wrong button. So what I want to do is turn this so I have a connection port up and a connection port down. The connection port down, of course, is going to be dedicated to our connector. So that's my bottom side connector. The connection port up, I think, just because we can, we'll put on possibly a Gatling turret that will connect in there. We could also do a missile turret if we really wanted to, and in this case, our medium container. And then on the back of this medium container, because it works, we will add on our gas generator. Okay, so that I think is the core of our fighter. And then from here, it's a matter of figuring out what all do we need to do from here. Oh, look at that. Alright, so let's take care of this energy thing. Flashy is annoying as all get out. Alright. T and one more T to close the doors and back to building. So, I should probably do ultimately a tutorial on shipbuilding, and I might actually do that. I'll probably write that down as an idea here of something I need to do. But what do we need for ships? Well, if we consider our original premise for survivability, that some of that kind of applies. So we need power. We're always going to need power, and whether we do that with batteries or something else really doesn't matter. So power. We need some mechanism to get power here. In this case, the small ship batteries are a 3x3x2. And why is that important? Because I conveniently have the sides of my ship here's a 3x3x2 area that I can use for something. So my thoughts are, and let me go ahead and put some stuff up on the world here. I need gyroscopes ultimately. So I have now placed down my oxygen generator so I can get rid of that. I'm going to use small reactors, and small reactors can be a bit limited, but there's ways around that. So my idea is I'm going to put 12 reactors on here, and I know that sounds like, oh my god, why do you need so many? But because they're limited, we're going to try and overcome that limit by way of reactors. So we're going to put 6 on the port side, 6 on the starboard side. Battery is here. And did I put yes, I did. But I do need, now that I discussed it just a little bit, is a Gatling turret. Now, the real wonder is, do we do a missile turret, which obviously the missiles can provide. Missiles are a lot more bang for the buck. The downside to missiles is you can shoot missiles out of the air or out of space. So is a Gatling turret better because it can provide a little bit of damage or a lot of damage because they are pretty rapid shooting little machines. So it's really kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other. If you're in motion and you're close, then missiles actually can be a good thing. So maybe having a missile turret here would be a good thing. So let's go ahead and, just for fun, do a missile turret. Now, what does the missile turret really mean? So you can see this is going to be facing forward. I'm going to paste that. I want to put that right here. Now, the trick with pasting these, let me go ahead and turn this up so you can see there is a large port here on the bottom. So the port is 3 by 3. The missile turret itself is 5 by 5. So when you're placing this, make sure that when you're looking, you actually see where everything is and you know that this is overlapping a little bit. Now the nice thing about this here is it's a little bit, it's inset into the top of the ship. And what I mean by that is if you look at the cockpit here on the left, the cockpit does go up one more block. This now, the weapon itself is going to fire over the top of the cockpit, which is exactly what we want. So it's going to have a full 360 arc, and we want to try and maintain that. So there's my my missile turret that hopefully will be able to work well. And while we're doing everything, we'll go ahead and let's change to this one. Punch up number 7, which is our bottom, our connector port, and we'll add that in. Again, be careful because, for example, it's green. It will paste on there just fine, but it won't work because it's offset 1. So even though this will let you paste it in an obnoxious angle, an obnoxious offset, it won't work. So you really want to align things and be very careful about your alignment. Watch your alignment as you're building. Okay, so there's our connector. Now the good news about this connector is, let me go up a little bit so we can see a little bit. If you look, this connector is at the same level at the bottom as our landing gear, which is exactly what we wanted. So the landing gear is too high, and the connector also too high. 2 as in TWO. So at this point, I think we're down to batteries and power. So let's deal with the batteries first. As I've said in other building tutorials, I am a big fan of batteries. Why do I like batteries so much? Because batteries are that draw capability, so we can draw very easily from the batteries, and also they are a reserve capability. The problem with, for example, small ship reactors, small reactors, you have a single port on them. So if you are building from scratch and you placed a reactor in, that reactor has to be accessible in some way because you have no power on the grid. Power is required for any kind of conveyor system. If you're going to move something through the conveyor system, it has to be powered for you to be able to move that. Which means if you have no power, then trying to put uranium into a reactor that's already bolted onto the ship is impossible. Can't do it. So by having batteries and some reserve power, then you will actually be able to do some of that. So let me build a battery. So that's the port side battery, and then we'll build on a starboard side battery, which is this one here. All right. So battery and battery. So now we have a slight bit of power. One of the things that I want to do is, here's my missile turret. So let's go ahead and configure the missile turret. We can only go out to a 600 meter arming radius, so I want to turn off the idle movement. Idle movement does take a slight amount of CPU time. And I also want to, again, turn off neutrals. I won't. I'll just shut up now. Reloadable rocket launcher. Figuring out which one that is. Actually, because I'm using that one on the side. So this is port. And I'm gonna, because, yeah, they're reloadable. We know that. And this is starboard. Back in the Gatling guns, we could 1 through 4 here in this case were the forward guns, and I don't know that there's any advantage of actually dare I say itemizing these and saying, okay, these are the forward guns, these are the port side guns, these are the starboard side guns. If you want some selectability in turning them on or off, then certainly that would be a great idea. Gatling guns, and create our group. We're going to turn those off on the toolbar and off on the terminal because we have them in the group, so that should be playing. Battery, this is the port because that was the first one I built. Battery 2 is the starboard side battery. Having named those, I'm still going to create a group called batteries. And save, toolbar config off, and terminal off. Now, I'm going to leave these things unchecked, and the reason I leave these unchecked is because I want that battery. If you do semi-auto, it's going to go on to, as it says here, sets recharge when stored power is 0, sets discharge when stored power is max. So it's going to be this endless cycle from 0% to 100%, back to 0%, back to 100%. So what I like is for this thing to be drawing power, which is to say recharging when there's power available on the grid, discharging when it needs to put power onto the grid completely automatically. But when there's excess power, it recharges until it gets to 100% and then it stays there. So it only discharges when there is a need for discharge on the grid. So I like to have my batteries go up to 100% and then stay there. All right, cargo container. Just because I am a little bit, this is small ammo 01. Let's see. There are 7 of them because that was pretty much all I could do. Number 2, number 3, 4, 5. Now, what am I doing here? This is a control A to select all, a control V to paste, which is this thing, and then I'm adding a number on it, which in this case is 6. So this is just you know, making things a little easier. So again, select into the box, control A to select all, V to paste over the top of it, and then number 7. Now, what was the purpose of small ammo containers? Because there's some argument to say that these are almost useless as far as as containers go. It's a small ship cargo container, so it's really, really tiny. And the answer is yes, true. It is really, really tiny. However, there was the space there, and I might as well do something with it. So conservation of space, useful of space. I could put an armor block in there, or I could put an ammo container in there and have some usage. Why did I put small ammo containers in? I want to be able to carry all of the ammo possible with this vessel and still be able to launch and maneuver successfully. But at the same time, I also want to have room in it for other things. The medium container is not that big. So with the fact that I have missiles on this thing and that missiles consume an awful lot of storage space, then I want to dedicate that cargo container to really two things, and that would be ice. So I have some reserve ice and missiles. If I need to store other ammo in that medium cargo container, then I'm not really efficiently using that space. The other side of that is that a small ship container cannot hold some of these bigger items, such as missiles. I cannot put missiles into these containers. I can only use the medium or large container to do that. So what I am going to do here is change the name of this just to be consistent on my cargo containers, and right now we're just going to call this medium. So all of my ammo containers, my medium cargo container, and we're going to conveniently call this containers. We're going to turn that off on the toolbar. No need to have those on the toolbar. They are obviously an inventory item, so leave that alone and turn them off. Rocket launchers. We'll go ahead and create a group here, and maybe weapons, rockets, and then we'll okay, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Turn it off on the toolbar. Inventory, we'll leave that one alone, and off on the terminal. We're going to recreate this. Obviously the guns are Gatling. There's no such thing as a missile gun, so we'll do the same thing here. Weapons and guns. Keep it simple. And then we'll delete this. Talking about groups, I know I've mentioned this before, but when you're wanting to rename a group, you can't actually rename a group. What happens is you create a new group as the new name and then delete the old group. So in this case, I had a Gatling guns. So I clicked on Gatling guns. I put in a new name here. I clicked on save, which actually is an identical group to the other one, which means all of the stuff that was in that group is going to be in the new group, and then select it on the old group and delete. So when you do a save, it's not really a save, it's a create a new, unless I'm actually adding stuff to it, and then sure enough. Okay, while we conveniently have this here, I'm going to go ahead and say forward. Why did I do that? Because, hey, it's an OCD thing, right? I don't really care for auto lock because auto lock happens as you're landing. The first one to auto lock is now where you are. You can't move anymore. So I don't like auto lock. I like being able to get all 3 or 5 or however many landing gear that you might have onto the ground and done. So, all right. I think that is all of the stuff that we can do for the moment, as far as the grouping. All right. So what are we going to do here? This is going to happen in 2 stages because I have things on different toolbars. So I'm going to put in small conveyors. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Small conveyors. So I'm going to take advantage of these guys, mostly because they're here. So not really any other reason. And then I'm going to put in reactors in groups. And the reason why is I want to in this case, name them. So we'll get back onto this thing, and we're going to do 2 things here. So 8 is our gyroscope, and I want to put 3 gyroscopes in, 3 on each side. And I don't know if that's going to be enough. I hope so. Swivel this I'm gonna have to look and see how these were. I think it was the dot was facing forward. Yes, it was. Oh no, actually the uncovered one is facing aft. So I like to try and be consistent. So yeah, like this. All right. So there's 3 more gyroscopes, and let's go back over to the port side so we can do these first. 7. My reactor. I'm going to turn a reactor like this, and 1, 2, 3. Remember I said we were going to do 12. So here are the 6 for the port side. And we're going to get to a port. So now the port's highlighted. I'm going to go into a K. My gyroscopes. And technically, because I pasted the first 3, I could say port 1, port 2, port 3, if I were really to get and this would be starboard 1, starboard 2, and starboard 3, and then create a group, gyros, create a group, save, off on the toolbar, off on the terminal, and reactors. So in this case is port 01. And why do I use the 0 designator? If I add more reactors somewhere, then I might go up beyond 9. So, you know, that may be... we're going to save that particular thing. So highlight and then Control C, which will make pasting in a little bit easier. In fact, if I just back up 1, paste, then I'll keep the number that happens to be there, which is correct. Obviously, when I get to the other side here, so there's small reactors so far. Alright, sorry about that pause, had the phone ring there. Alright, now that we have that there, let's go ahead and loop over to the other side here, and put our reactors in on this side. So flip that over the correct way. 1, 2, 3. Even though I came from the back, maybe that's a little bit of an inconsistency there. 2, 3. All right, 0 to deselect, back into a port, and so 7 in this case is going to be dash starboard 01. Control C that. Paste 02, paste 03. Now, if I were really being intelligent, this is actually 01, which is the front, and 03. Not sure why those are set as incomplete, and this was the front, which becomes 4. 5 and 6. Alright, so we appear to have all of our reactors here, port and starboard, 6 and 6, which is 12. And we'll call this reactors. Save. Off on the toolbar, they are an inventory item, which is to say they can take an inventory, so we'll leave that, and then off. Okay. Alright, so we are kind of down to how are we going to attach things like propulsion. So we're down to really kind of considering what we're going to do for propulsion. Now, we've got a couple options. The tank is a 5x5. So if I'm going to do hydrogen, then I do have the room for it, but I just have to kind of decide how I want to do that. So effectively, we're going to have, let's go ahead, just for sake of example, having a look at it. What can we get rid of here? G. All right. So we've already placed our missile turret. We've already placed our batteries, and we've already placed, don't need that anymore, and don't need gyroscopes anymore. So small reactor. Let's see what is on my toolbar over here. I think we're done with small cargo containers. We've already got our medium cargo containers. Not likely going to need this anymore. We're definitely going to need landing gear because we're not done there, and we're done with our connector. Might put more guns on depending on where everything is. So what do we need? We need tank, which is a hydrogen tank. And if we're steering in the direction of hydrogen thrusters, which may be a dangerous thing, when it comes to thruster. When it comes to a fighter, the last thing you want is for your fighter to run out of fuel and then all of a sudden you're stranded and can't do anything. But you do have gyros and hopefully ammo, which means you can at least orbit around and defend yourself for as long as power lasts. But you know, so there's a downside to hydrogen. But let's look and see. Let's go ahead and just put the tank up here. Now, one of the things you notice here is we have a big and a big on the ends, which means I now have to have some way to convert from a small, which is what this guy has, so the aft end of, in this case, the gas generator, versus the tank. So if I connect this on here, then I'm really just kind of I'm needing some way to connect this in. So having said that, let's consider for a moment that having a second gas generator may not be a bad idea. So let's have a look. In this case, I have the two ports as they are. So let's spin this around and then bolt this up here, and then bolt a hydrogen tank directly on the back here, which now is a large connector, a large port to a large port. And then, just to make it interesting, we get a large line it up, make sure it's lined up, put a large Okay, interesting trick, which not really terribly important to know, although it's a neat trick. So grab something, anything, it doesn't matter. If you want to reset a turret to its base position, which is really to say its idle parked position, after you've turned off idle movement, change the color. So what I'm going to do is paste this as black. You're going to see it rotate all the way around and sit in the neutral. Bing! And then we'll paste it back to recolorize it back to our original position. Original color, sorry. All right, so looky there. Okay, now we have a tank, which is a good thing, and we have now one thruster. Now this is getting to be a pretty big fighter, which means I may not have enough enough thrust capability here to do everything I wanted to do, which is not necessarily a good thing. So we need to consider our up and down motion, that sort of thing. And so we need 6 different directions of thrust, if you recall. How are we going to do that? Interesting ideas. So can't really do anything in the front, but let's consider for a moment that we could put 2 hydrogen thrusters here. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and use the grind function because it's a lot more accurate than me grinding things. So I'm going to change that one, and in fact that one, and then this and this. Change my colors back, in this case to black, because that was my color scheme here. We have a small conveyor, so we're going to paste that in, and small conveyor, paste that in. We're going to go to 5 and paste in a small thruster there, a small thruster there, and we're actually going to do the same thing up here, but I'm going to change colors, back to tiger orange, go to number 6, conveyor, and conveyor, and then thruster, and thruster. Now, one of the interesting things here, and it's really kind of how you want to look at things, I'm going to go ahead and paste another thruster there. Why am I doing that? In this case, I have connectability here, and I want to bring that out to here. So it's going to look a little different. Do I want to do that? The problem is I'm a little limited in where I can put forward thrusters, unless I want to go outside the scope and put them somewhere else. So right now I'm trying to keep this fairly narrow. So let's I'm actually going to put these here. No, I guess it won't really matter. And then do this and this. Alright, so and that. Alright, one of of the other things I want to do is add on a remote control if I can find it. Probably passed it, but let's just do remote and stick this in. So one of the things to remember is how this is facing. Right now it is facing forward, which is what you want. And I want to put that right there. Normally I would put this right here. Why? Because then the position of this is very close to the position of you, which is to say when you're sitting in the cockpit. In this case it doesn't really matter. So we'll put that there. What do I want to do here? I think we're just going to put a block here. Now we can either use a standard block, which is this, and then slope it downwards, maybe, or put 2 blocks and then put slopes on the outside. So I'm going to plan on the sloping to the outside. May not be necessary, but we'll kind of build that in. Originally, I was going to do the slope symmetrical with the cockpit here, but now that I've added on things like the thrusters here forward, then that changes things a little bit. What else can we do as far as weapons and that sort of thing? So let me go back to my Gatling guns, and I'm going to go ahead and put another set out here. Now it's really up to you how you want to do the different things. I kind of like these staggered tier kind of a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and paste 3 of these guys. So the missiles are going to be the staggered in, and then the guns slightly outside of that. We're going to do the same thing on this side, so that's going to add 3 more guns, port and starboard. So 6 guns total, and then we can decide, do we want to add perhaps another another thruster. And let me go ahead and play with that idea just a little bit. So 6, we're going to use again the selective grind, because grinding on a small ship can be a little unpredictable. Sometimes you end up grinding a lot more than what you intended to grind. So I'm going to use the grinding function of the build and repair system to do that for me. That way I can be a little more careful. Alright, I am pulling my gas off of this here. So let me go ahead and put I'm going to go ahead and do this, and even though it might look a little bit ugly, I'm going to do this, and there's a reason for this. And then we're going to do an elbow to connect in. So that basically connects my Gatling guns, in this case on the top side. So let me go ahead and put this here, and then we did this, and this. Now, why did I do that? Well, here's why. Because I'm going to go ahead and add 1 more thruster here. And if I'm really intelligently setting everything up, then I will do the same down here. In this case, we are going to really just utilize what's here to help aid us. So we're going to go ahead and do this. which will allow us to connect in. We want the curved conveyor tube, so we're going to go ahead and connect that there. Connect this here. And then we kind of have to decide how we're going to do this. Are we going to connect small conveyor tube this way, and then this way, this way, which then interconnects all of this stuff, even though technically it's all interconnected via this block here. So this block goes into the cockpit, of course, and then this also bolts onto the back of the cockpit. So kind of an interesting thing there. Let us go ahead and block this in. In this case, we're just going to leave it as it is. What else do we need? So we have quite a bit of forward thrust, which is to say these thrusters facing forward. Are they sufficient? So we really have 10 of these. Are they sufficient to completely counter this large aft thruster? And that I don't know. To do that, I would need the exact numbers, and I don't have those off the top of my head. So I think we have quite a bit of forward firepower. We have 4, 10, and then 16. So we actually have 16 guns, or rather 14 guns, sorry. We have 4 and 4, which are these centerline ones, and then we have 3 more on the outside on each side, which is 6 more. So we have 8 plus 6 is 14. So we have 14 forward-facing Gatling guns, and then we have ultimately 2 missile launchers, which can launch really 2 at a time. 2 at a time times 4, and then they have to reload. So quite a bit of forward-facing firepower, all things considered. Now what we need to do is figure out how we are going to put in thrusters for the rest of this stuff. Which shall be an interesting quandary. The other side is, do we layer things here? Where do we put those thrusters? How do we put in those thrusters? Do we go outside the boundaries of our vessel here? How do we do this? I have slightly limited myself in terms of how I can do this. So one of the possibilities here is to actually mount additional gyros on, and maybe we should consider doing that. Do I still have gyros? No. Gee, I think we are done with Gatling guns, and I think we're done with that. Certainly do not need the larger one, this, and we're done with this. So let us consider for a moment the ability to get, what I'm thinking is flush. Try, there we go. That will probably not last very long. let us add 2 more gyros, 1 and 1. And we'll do the same thing on this side, which is a 1 and a 1. I'm going to change color, use the grinding capability before I do that. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more. So we're going to have 6 gyros on a side. That may or may not be a detriment. Spin these. This. It could be a problem. But the good news is I can always turn down the gyro power. I can't turn it up. Which is really to say, once I exceed my gyro capability, 100% of my gyros, which is to say the gyros are running at 100% power, then pretty much done. All right. Here's my thoughts. We're going to change back to our tiger orange. We're going to place a conveyor junction, small conveyor junction.
Energy low.
That doesn't work out exactly how I perceived. Well, we may not have a choice but to do things this way. Alright, so there's 5 and 5. Why did we do 5 and 5? And I'll show you why here in just a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll go back to our big ones, small ones. And we will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 2, 3, 4, 5. Slight bit blocky. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and add that in, then a slope. There's our slope. Form. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I don't know how this is going to look. It might actually look really, really silly. But we'll go ahead and try it anyway. Because I don't think I have any other options for the upward thrust, we're going to do the upward thrust like this. probably not going to look the nicest, but as I really figure out how this is going to come together, and again, your style of building, you know, do you build the core elements of your vessel first, and then come back and build other things later, and that's really up to your own style. So let me go back to number 5, and we'll paste in these 5 thrusters. Okay, now one of the things to consider, and this is again starting to look like a little bit of a silly looking fighter. It's a lot bigger, a lot more resource hungry than you might want it to be. Obviously for a beginning building kind of a fighter, this is probably not ideal, but we're just kind of, you know, rolling with the proverbial punches here. Let me try and do an F5 here and see. There we go. Get rid of the flashing for a little bit. Here's one of the issues to consider. We have forward thrust to counter the rear thrust, which is good. We now have up thrust and down thrust in equal proportion, which is really to say 10 and 10. So we have 10 small hydrogen thrusters pointing down. We have 10 small hydrogen thrusters pointing up. But an issue to consider is that we have only 5 thrusters pointing to the side. So this may be a consideration that this could be an issue. So how do we deal with this? And that's where things may get a little interesting. So how do we deal with those sorts of things? And that's really fully dependent upon what are we going to do as far as next. What's next? So one of the things that I was considering, which would certainly be unique about this thruster or about this particular fighter, is do we put a big thruster in here? So let's go ahead and just for fun do that. So definitely add on a pretty large scale thrust capability now port and starboard. Alright, so the next thing to consider is how do we connect these in? We can either come up from the back and in, or back from the front and in. So let me turn that off. So we have this port here that we could actually move these guys back one and come in on the front of the battery, or sorry, the back of the battery but the front of the thruster, or there's something else to consider. Right through here, this may be the simplest mechanism. In fact, let's go ahead and investigate this just to get it on the table. Right in here, because a connector is a connector, there's a port there. So let us go ahead and consider for a moment. consider for a moment the considerations of redundancy, then we are completely posing ourselves. So what I'm thinking I would like to do is go ahead and create a redundant path, and we're going to create that by way of the side ports on this hydrogen tank. So let's go ahead and figure out how we want to do this. This here, this here, and this here. There, there. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. There we go. Alright, so all connected in. Redundancy where possible. So at this point now, it's just the matter of figuring out how we want to make everything work. Alright, so next concept is really about where to put landing gear. So landing gear is 3 by 2 by 1. So where are we going to put something that would be 3 by 2 by 1? And I'm thinking we can either do it on the outside by building something here, or we could put it a little bit forward. Now, if we put it a little forward, then it's going to look a little bit strange on this aft portion. So let's go ahead, just for fun, and build in, we're going to ultimately put blocks on the side here. So let me see, go ahead and we'll start putting our tiger stripes in. So there's a stripey, and then let's stripe back this way. So we'll carry on this kind of a stripe. So we did this out, and then, oh darn, didn't want to do that. Didn't want to stripe our battery. I think we're going to keep this slope following through. So let me change back to the black. We'll colorize as we go. This is a slope. I think I'm going to put the landing gear right here. And the way we will do that is put in, this may be a little bit of a challenge to figure out how this is going to happen. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Energy critical.
2, 3, 4. So let us go ahead and do the same thing on this side, which is to say, put a block there, and I guess we can put that block there, and then add those 3, which ultimately are going to be our mount points, rather, for our landing gear. So let's go ahead and investigate landing gear. In this case, we just want to make sure they're pointed in the right way. Hard to see where these guys are. Okay, I think this is forward. At least I hope. Yeah, forward. All right. Why is that not pasting in? There we go. All right. All right, and we're back to doing some prettying up of different things here. So change our color, change back to our slope, and paste in to there. Heavy armor block, change colors again. So this might be best described as a heavy fighter, perhaps. So let's see what we can do here. We're going to continue on. I think we're going to do a bit more slope. I'm going to reverse the slope here, and then put 2 blocks there. Not too bad. And then more slope. Continue this slope on back pretty much identically to what we did in the back on the bottom. So there, and then oh, and we never put the thrusters on here. Definitely not that one. Alright. Oh darn it. That's definitely not what we wanted there. Again, using the grinding mechanism to get rid of that one. And then back to our normal color, and then back to our building of our slope. Spin this around in the correct direction, top and bottom. There. We may do some more, and this is why I say we use some of these other styles of blocks to do. Oh darn, I don't think I wanted to do. No, I didn't. But we'll come back to that. So what I'm thinking is, how do I want to deal with this? Do we want to put angle blocks here to carry on with this outer slope, which kind of hides that, or do we want to do a little bit more shall I say, aesthetically pleasing slopes? So let's spin and
No
do
energy.
this here. so another set of creative grinding. So we're going to grind that one, we're going to grind this one because I actually want to reverse that. And then this block that I mistakenly placed in there, we'll do that. Okay, change colors again. Here, I want to actually do this, and there's a reason. And then we will also do this. And we're going to change these as well. And I don't know how this is going to look, so we will discover as we go. But let's get ourselves that far over here. So this one goes and that one goes. Change colors back to our tiger orange. We spin this. Get here a little closer so we can see what we're doing. Spin again. Put that one there. Spin again to come down this length. All right. And lastly, we're going to do a, that was supposed to be a 3. Hard to see with the flashy going on there. Alright, which will go here. Spin here, one more spin to go here. Spin and go there. Okay. Now the last thing we wanted to do is replace these, and this is actually an inverted corner. I don't know if that's going to work out really well. I can live with that. Not perfect, but I like it. Alright. And then we'll do the same thing over here. Of course, the only thing we really need to do at this point, so we're going to change to our black stripey and color that one. I will go ahead and color that one for posterity value. And then black stripe down the side. I don't know if we did that one on this side. Yes, we did.
No energy.
think just for fun, we'll do the stripe there. Alright. So definitely an odd looking fighter. Not the most elegant looking creature at all, ever, but something. Okay, well, I was going to say, okay, I just looked at my timer and I'm, of course, way over. But being as we're 15 minutes away from the 2-hour mark, maybe we'll just continue and roll with it. So, more blocks. We'll change back to Tiger Orange. And question is to use either these, or do I go ahead and use a slope? Maybe we'll just use the slope and continue on. So what I'm thinking is actually, let's do the grinding. What I want to do here is figure out how to taper this inwards. So let's do the easy portion first, which is this, and maybe we want to go to there. Oh, okay. Alright, well, that was not quite as easy as I was hoping for. Alright, so let us reconsider just a little bit. So we're going to do these. We'll change the color of that one. Okay, and then with this one in mind, we will add the center piece.
energy.
Be there and there. Not there. So ultimately we want, let's go ahead and do the inverted corner here, which is not perfect. So we're going to slope twice, I think. Corner, let's get this up to where it was. The corner. Mirror this side here. All right. So let me go ahead and change paint black where I need to paint. So that one and that one is black, and in fact, this one is black. But let's remove. So this is good. But this one is where we remove that piece, that piece, that piece, and that piece, which also includes that one. And God forbid this game ever actually removes the piece you're pointing at. So we have a corner and an inverted corner, which is here. And let's figure out what we got here. I see. Need to remove that piece, right? Yep. So that one was, well, maybe that's a good thing. This one was in the wrong place anyway. Possibly change the colorations of these guys.
energy.
Grind. Because we actually need a block there. We're going to go ahead and do that stripey black. And then the inverted corner is there. So slightly different top and well, actually, you know what? We're gonna move that because the same issue here. This drops down in before this slope. I want it after the slope. So 1 and 2. So then this becomes. Actually, let's go ahead and remove that on the other side here as well. Two, and then slope downwards. So let's we'll recreate what we have on this side. That way it'll be hopefully a little easier to mirror. I'm a few blocks off. So we have this and this, and then on the bottom this and this, and then block and block. For this, we have. So I'm going to have to do this, and then this. We'll do the 3. Which is the tip, which we'll do here, and then we'll have to drop down here. We're actually going to remove there's that one and this one. All right. So having gotten us to this point, we can either leave this here for the kind of asymmetric value, which I do kind of like, or we can slope down using the blocks as they are symmetrically. So let's do it both ways, just for having done so. So 4. And this is going to reverse, so we'll put this one here, and then its counterpart here. So we have this slope versus the asymmetric slope here, but ultimately end up to the same triangle here. I still, and maybe this is just me, I kind of like the asymmetric sloping. I couldn't even say why. Just, All right. So having said that, I think I've decided to do that. So let's, oops, we're grinding here. This is a
No energy.
armor block, and then the inverted corner there. And the same thing over here, the inverted corner here, and the block there. Now, here is going to be a little more challenging because we are effectively putting a slope here and here, which will then taper off to that first stair step, like this. So now we basically have the same thing on both sides, which is a good thing, I think. The only other thing, the wonder is, do I place another two, in this case, one on each side, thrusters here, or do I get a little more creative and create a ring of small thrusters back here? So let's go ahead and investigate what this might look like. So we need, in this case, we need a conveyor junction. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, and I'm currently colored black, which is fine, actually. We will do the full squared off ring here. This may be may not be quite how we want it. 5, and turn this sideways. I think I can work with that. In this case, we're going to do a block there. Block there. We're going to change the color of those two blocks. In fact, let's go ahead and change the color of that one too. So that one, and we'll go ahead and do a 45 here. Slope. In this case, it's now back to our tiger stripe. So there's that one there. And there maybe is already there. No, it's not. same thing on this side. See a darn thing. Like that and that.
No energy.
Then, in this case, we're back to the number 3, which is a slope there, slope there. So the question here is if we like this particular sloping mechanism, or if we want to do something different, which is to say in these corners, do I have 12 or do I continue on with this 16 mechanism here? There's a good portion of me that wants to do something a little different. Grinding. Grind, grind. So what I'm thinking, let's go ahead and stay on with the tiger stripey. We're going to use the inverted corner here. Maybe not. Armor slope. Let's do this and then corner. Unfortunately, we can't put anything here because the tank is here. So we'll continue that motif. Now, the real question is, do we have too much black back here? And we may. So, let's go ahead and remedy that. And do the... a little bit. Okay, F5, see if we can get rid of the flashy, which it did. Alright. So, there's some good and some bad. It's the ugliest fighter craft ever. But, we'll go with it. Okay. So we have these other Gatling guns, and we have weapons guns, save, off and off. We have a new set of gyroscopes, which we'll put in for gyros, save, off and off. We have now a bunch of thrusters on board here. We have, at this point, no maneuvering thrusters. This number 2, if I recall correctly, is the starboard side. The one we nuked and put back in was actually the port side. The good news is here we create a group. We're turning auto lock off and landing gear as a group, and off on the toolbar, off on the terminal. Thrusters. We have a bunch of thrusters. I think I'm just going to say one here. We'll come back and possibly do a little bit more here, but for right now, thrusters. So thrusters, and there really is a reason why I call these main, and off and off. Alright, we have the missile turret, we have the oxygen generator. This one is the forward, this one is the aft, even though they're right next to each other. So we'll go ahead and call this gas generators, generatress. And also turn those off and off. So we have our remote control, we have our missile turret, we have our hydrogen tank, which we're going to eventually put into something. We have the cockpit and the connector. Now, one of the things we're missing is an antenna. We definitely need an antenna. Where do we put the antenna? Well, we can pretty much put it anywhere. But let's go ahead and do a creative place for the antenna. And I'm thinking right here is a great place. So, bring our antenna in. Put it there. Let's change our color. Change our color back to, let's do it tiger stripe, or not tiger, let's do tiger, standard tiger orange, and we'll put the antenna there. Okay, so we've pretty much finished this rather bizarre looking craft. Obviously we have a lot to go. We have to put fuel into it, we have to put ice into it, get it generating, and then do the maneuverability testing. But because I am now over my 2-hour mark, then we will sign off here, terminate the video here. So this is Ken T. Tigers signing off, and we will see you next time.